My mum just is never going to be able to pick that up and carry it around for very long.
Welcome to the Automotive Business Podcast, where we sit down with the architects of the trade to find the tactical edge in your business motoring world. Whether you are managing a single retail site or a large corporate fleet, we are here to throw a spotlight on the margins, the machines, and the markets. I'm Adrian Simpson, and today we go from the forecourt to the final connection point. While billions are being spent on charging networks and battery gigafactories, the entire success of the EV transition often comes down to the last 5 meters of cable. It is the piece of hardware that every driver touches, but most of the industry treats as an afterthought. My guest today is a serial entrepreneur who specializes in spotting gaps in technical markets. After co-founding and successfully selling the global cloud security firm EveryCloud, Graham O'Reilly turned his attention to the burgeoning electric vehicle market. In 2021, he co-founded Watts and acquired evcables.com, bringing high-end manufacturing and testing to Marlow, Buckinghamshire. Today, his company is the original UK manufacturer for EV cables, serving everyone from individual drivers to massive national distributors. From developing ultra-flexible TPU moulding to oversized pilot cores that prevent communication failure, he is redefining the standards of EV hardware. Graham, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
How do you feel about being called a serial entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think it's very generous, but yeah, I like it.
Let's crack on with the questions. You spent years in IT security with AVG and EveryCloud. What did the world of cybersecurity teach you about building a physical product like an EV cable?
On the one hand, not a lot, really. It's been a kind of a real sort of ground up learning experience. Manufacturing is really hard. In the software world, we were so used to having an endless amount of the product available. And then once you have shipped the product, you can then keep iterating, you can add more features, you can fix bugs, this kind of thing. But with the manufacturing, obviously, all of that goes out the window. You have a sort of limited supply. And then once you do ship, that's it. It was really a lot to learn from the ground up. I think one thing we have borrowed really is that sort of on-demand idea, though. My co-founder and I, Ian, we were frustrated initially by that fact that you can't just have kind of an endless amount of supply. So we tried to think what is the nearest thing in manufacturing, which is really this sort of build-to-order model. So we essentially hold all of the ingredients that we need in stock at any one time. And as the orders come in from consumers or partners, we literally just build them for that order. And that creates just this really big range of product options, colors, lengths and so on. And it also just means we can be very fast with our customers.
I don't know very much about manufacturing, but I do know the likes of Dyson, the likes of Raleigh and countless others have gone overseas to make what they make. Why is it working for you to do that in the UK?
Partly it's just proximity to the customer. Most of our customers are UK based. We've been focused on the UK. And a big gain for them is just having that speed. So, if a fleet needs 10, 15 cables, we can get them literally out the next day. But then if there's a local sort of OEM that needs 100, 200, 300, again, it's a matter of weeks. And at the beginning, we had that kind of experience of just watching cables and stock coming in from overseas on boats, just coming bit by bit towards us. And we just saw that, okay, this can be a much better experience for our customers and partners if we just keep close to their location.
It might sound like a stupid question, but were you an EV convert at the beginning of it, or was it something you were experimenting with? What's your story with electric vehicles?
Yeah, so definitely not a car background. I was in accountancy software, then in security software. I built EveryCloud, which was an anti-spam company, and sold that to a German partner. But then EV gave me that interest, and that piqued my sort of curiosity because it suddenly opened up that software side, and having my first EV just felt like a toy, really. It was just having that same sort of experience of having a new phone or laptop or whatever, but in a car sort of version. And then my co-founder and I spent a long time just talking about how we could get into this market, in this world. And the cable just seemed like a really overlooked part of the infrastructure, really. Everyone wanted to focus on the charge points and obviously the cars themselves and the bigger, sort of sexier stuff. And cables just seemed a bit unloved, really. There's a real opportunity for someone to grab hold of that and build a brand and just give a better solution for customers.
So why do you think is the charging cable often the weakest link in the EV ownership journey? And how are your designs addressing common failure points like signal integrity?
Yeah, I guess there's two parts to that, really. There's the initial sort of design and product itself, and then there's the what if something goes wrong. So in terms of the product, obviously design is critical, and then it's just the components. So we use really high-grade plastics, we use hyperboloid contacts, which just mean a very good connection with the charge point. And then we've just obsessed over the flex itself. But then in terms of serviceability, we just saw that most of our competitors, if not everyone really, was doing an overmolded plug, which essentially just means that if something does go wrong, there's no way of opening it up, there's no way of fixing it, and you just have to throw it away. So we designed our plugs to be serviceable. This is actually James Lowe, our head of engineering, just obsessed over this. We say 2 years in and you run over your plug, you can just send the cable back to us and we'll just replace the plastics and the pins. We'll test it again, exactly the same sort of standard that we started with, and we'll just send it back to you and you can go again. So theoretically, they can just go on for sort of 10 years plus, which is good for the customer and good for the environment.
So when you just said just there, you were obsessing over the flex, what does that mean?
I guess as much as the plug and everything else is important, the cable itself is obviously the core of it. So there's the weight aspect. A small difference in actual component makes a huge difference in terms of weight. And a 3-phase cable can just be extremely heavy, especially over kind of 10, 15 meters. So we just wanted to make sure we just manufacture the lightest possible cables. And then things like the coil, we've probably coiled more than most in terms of EV cables, and just realized pretty quickly that the way that it naturally coils is actually really important in terms of if you're going to put it into your boot and it's just going to sit nicely, or are you just fighting it all the time and just a sort of unwieldy mess.
Do you think about cables in your dreams?
100%. Yeah, it's quite sad, but it's all we've thought about for 5 years, really.
You developed a system to make cables thinner, more flexible without losing durability. Why does the weight and coil behavior of a cable matter so much for your everyday driver?
As EVs expand and the audience expands, I was talking to my mum the other day because she's considering getting an EV, and a 3-phase 32 amp cable can get extremely heavy when it's 10 meters or so. And my mum just is never going to be able to pick that up and carry it around for very long. So weight just is really important, just in terms of accessibility. And all of us, really, it's just frustrating having to carry around a heavy object. And then, yeah, just the way it coils is really key too. You want to make sure that it actually works with you when you're putting it away and storing it.
And I think we've got somewhere around 60,000 public connectors now in the UK. So how is the role of the portable charger changing as we move toward total market normalization, if you will?
Yeah, we're a big fan of portables. I use one at home a lot just to charge overnight because we have charging in the office. I've never really felt the need to have a proper wall charger at the house. We just can take our time with a portable. And then having it in the boot just for emergencies very much helps with range anxiety. But I think the bit that gets missed really is that portables can actually be really high power. So there's commando versions available that can be 7 kilowatt, 22 kilowatt. And so this sort of granny charger label is a bit unfair, really. And especially for fleets, when we visit depots, you can just see they've got a few sort of wall chargers available, and it just becomes this choke point for all the vehicles. Whereas if you've got a longer length 22 kilowatt portable, you can leave the cars where they are and you can just charge them as you wish. That transition is becoming more about understanding that there's just a lot more you can do with a higher power portable.
I would like to say for any avid podcast listeners who are grannies, being a granny charger wasn't a non-gratuitous term. We're very much celebrating your age and everything else that goes with it. I like the idea of a commando charger. Was it a 22 kilowatts?
Yeah. You could have it installed in your house, but most sort of depots or any industrial building will have a commando socket available, so you can just plug in and go.
Have you thought about the future? What's the future of charging?
We keep our eye on things like wireless charging, and clearly it's going to have its place with Tesla using it. I hear Porsche have an option available, but it's so edge case at the moment for us that it's a very long way off. But yeah, fundamentally, we're here to serve that sort of charging experience, really. So as the market evolves, we will evolve with it.
Great. Given the volume of vehicles they're managing, is there anything that fleets need to think about differently when it comes to EV charging cables?
The difference really is they've got a lot more cables. So it becomes asset management very quickly once you've got hundreds, 100, 200, 300 cables, just making sure you know where they are, tracking them, etc. But then we also started thinking more about the PAT testing side of things, where fleets and businesses are testing all electrical equipment. Again, cables just seem to be a bit of a forgotten part of that. And so we've been developing a service now where we'll take back cables and just test them on an annual basis for the fleets, because it's just a fundamentally important part of their electrical equipment that needs just testing in the same way that anything else does.
You offer cables up to 50 metres for difficult installations. How does this solve the infrastructure gap for older UK properties without dedicated off-street parking?
The standards do actually allow up to 50 metres for charging cables. So we often hear of people doing really expensive groundworks to get the actual charger installed as close as possible to the car, when it's really unnecessary. They could just have a longer cable. 15 metres is pretty common. 20 metres, 25 metres that would just go around the side of the house to reach wherever their charge point is.
Don't tell me that's exactly what I've done about a year ago. I didn't even know that you could get them that length.
It's different decisions for different people. Some people just want the sort of aesthetics of having it wherever they want it. But if it is a cost decision, then often it's just far cheaper to buy a longer cable and have it stretch to where you need it.
If only we'd had this podcast a year ago. Okay, you use an oversized 0.75 millimeter pilot core. Now I'm going to pretend to know what that is, compared to the 0.5 millimeter industry standard. Don't say that we don't do the most exciting questions on this podcast. Can you explain the science, I bet you're glad I asked this question, of how this specifically reduces the risk of a car refusing to charge? That sounds like a GCSE physics question. If you're enjoying the Automotive Business Podcast, then why not check out our video reviews on business motoring, where we test drive everything from the venerable Range Rover right through to the latest Chinese SUVs, allowing you to make the very best informed decision for your next fleet purchase.
Yeah, it's the pilot core that does the handshake with the car and the charger. So when you plug the cable in on both sides, the car is communicating with the charger to say that it wants to draw the current, and then the whole thing gets started. The problem is with a longer cable is that the thinner pilot cores just don't keep signal integrity over longer lengths. And it depends, again, with the combination of the car and the charger and the cable. So we just saw this was sort of a common failure point, and so we overspec'd ours just to be thicker, fundamentally. So it just means that when you do have those longer cables, it means that the signal does work over those longer lengths.
Following your acquisition of evcables.com, you integrated your testing. So how essential is this testing for large corporate distributors who are now facing much stricter ESG and safety audits?
Yeah, we just felt testing had to be at the core of everything when we started, really, with this not being our background as well. It was partly us just wanting to make sure we get that right from the ground up. And then James came in and just built this extremely detailed sort of testing setup that we now have. It's so accurate that it can detect the length of the cable as well. So if we do actually build one the wrong length, it'll tell us off the bat. So yeah, testing's just critical. It makes us sleep at night. And it's just, something that I think with whatever cable you're looking to purchase, you just make sure that it's tested very thoroughly.
With however immersed you've been in the EV world, what do you think of its future? How do you think it's going to develop? What do you think the limitations are, the hopes and dreams for the whole EV sector?
We've seen all of a sudden how quickly it can grow as the sort of fleet of EVs grow in the UK. The business is evolving now from us just finding that sort of product market fit, and we believe that people would want that sort of range of options, to now us working out how we scale and how we just deliver that sort of consistency as it gets bigger and bigger. Personally, I think, EVs are a fundamentally better product that's starting to just be the wisdom across the UK. We're hitting a point where that tipping point has passed, really, where the OEMs are fully committed, and we'll just see the fleet sort of grow and grow.
And now for our quick fire round, where we ask some salient, pithy questions, hoping for some insightful, succinct answers. What we normally get is some insightful, not such succinct answers. So, Graham, what would you say is the most undervalued component in a modern EV?
I'd say the onboard charger. It doesn't matter how powerful your charger is. If your onboard charger is limiting that, then that's your limit. So we often have customers coming to us asking to buy a 22 kilowatt cable, and their car can only provide 7 kilowatt charge.
Will tethered chargers at home eventually make the boot cable obsolete?
I'd say the opposite. If anything, we're more these days advising people that it's quite useful to go for an untethered one because it just gives you more options.
Okay, Graham, you've got a billboard outside a car dealership. In 5 words or less, what is the future of EV charging?
Charging that works every time.
That is fantastic. If there's any advertising agencies out there, Graham is available for copywriting. And finally, Graham, if you were a car, what car would you be?
I would definitely be a Tesla EV, I think, because it's probably the geekiest car that I can think of.
You're saying you have a geeky personality?
Exactly, yeah. Very much a geeky side, yeah. I think that's why EVs are so appealing, really, because it's bringing in a new group of geeks to the fold.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us, Graham, on the Automotive Business Podcast. It's been great to talk to you. And hopefully, in a few years' time, we'll have you back on when you're a multi-billionaire and you've sold your now company like you did with Every Club. But thank you so much, and we'll see you again very soon, I hope.
Thanks for having me on.
That was Graham O'Reilly, proving that in 2026, the smallest details often define the biggest transitions. If your connection fails, the whole strategy fails. You've been listening to the Automotive Business Podcast. For the daily pulse of industry and deeper strategy, make sure you're checking out Motor Trade News and Business Motoring. I'm Adrian Simpson, and we will see you on the next shift from the forecourt to the fleet.